All right, welcome back to the second semester of the 2014-2015 NCRHA season. We're back bringing you some more coverage that we were a little lackadaisical on last semester, and we're going to try to get back to where we've been in the past, bringing you guys as much coverage, news, and updates, as well as our rankings, but also getting the radio show and podcast going again, as we have in years past. I'm Kevin Smith, joined by Ian Prescott, and we will be bringing you a little bit of a recap from this past weekend's events in Mount Pleasant and Las Vegas, the two big interregionals of the season, and definitely of this semester, some of the showcase events going into regionals. Ian, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing well, man. How you doing? Just taking a look at some of these things that were going on across the country, and looks like there's a lot of stuff that's going busy, not just in the D2 world, the D1, situation, but also in D2. So kind of are looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty of this.
Yeah, there's so much that we have to go over, and obviously with rankings and stuff, we've kind of taken a little bit of time off since our last ranking, so I think that is something that we'll kind of get to and get to talk about, but definitely going to jump right into these past couple weekends, and there's some other stuff we will kind of cover once we get our rankings out, which we are looking to get out in the next day or so, and then we'll have another show where we can kind of talk about that and why teams went where. But we will have updated rankings coming this week for D1, D2, and D3, all three divisions. So that will be cool, so something to look forward to there. Make sure if you have any questions for us or anything after you're listening to this or as you listen, feel free to shoot us a tweet, and we will try to get to your questions or comments at NCRHA_C2C. Ian, we've got first up on the agenda, let's go to Vegas, because I think that there's definitely a lot more to talk about that happened in Pittsburgh, in Mount Pleasant, but let's take a second here and we can go take a look at the Vegas event that happened this past weekend. And obviously, I know you weren't there, but you were following pretty intensely from Arizona, and so maybe tell us a little bit about your thoughts looking at results and everything like that.
Well, it looks like some of the things that we had originally known were being reaffirmed here. We have UNLV pretty much sitting at the top of the standings, just like as they have been in the Western League, and we also know that Arizona State's been a pretty tough team out in the West for quite some while too. They're sitting in third in the WCRHL right now, but luckily we also get to see how the Rocky Mountain kind of compares. Two teams that were out there who were 5-3, which is Colorado Springs, and Colorado State decided to come down to the Las Vegas Interregional, which is a good time to be had by all, and such a kind of awesome venue. So and it was the first home game for UNLV in their team's, or not in their team's history, but in quite some time. So that was all really interesting stuff to see this weekend.
Yeah, I think they said 5 years or something along the lines of that for the last time that they played in Vegas, which is pretty cool. So hopefully more coming there, and good to see the Corsatea is running that rink and the event that they put on now that Darren Corsatea is playing for UNLV, so pretty cool to see those guys getting back involved with the NCRHA and the college roller scene. So here we've got the landing page, if you will, for the tournament, and we did have a little bit of a mix-up, and that's kind of reflected in this tournament summary. So San Jose State, not the tournament champion, although they did defeat Colorado State in the last game of the night, 12-7. So the format was a 5-team event, and each team was going to play 4 games, and then there was going to be a championship game. ASU and UNLV were the top 2 seeds going into the last round-robin game for those teams, and they knew they were going to meet in the championship, so they decided to move the championship game up to 7 o'clock, which was also the showcase game that UNLV had kind of promoted to get people in the building and watching and stuff, as the championship wasn't scheduled until, I believe, 10 o'clock for a later game to give teams ample rest time, depending on who would make the final. So instead of playing a back-to-back and only really having the second game carry that weight, as the the interregional championship game or whatever, these teams decided to play the 7 o'clock game for the final. So here's a look at kind of some of the schedule and results. Colorado State definitely struggled a little bit. They came short and only had, I want to say, 5 or 6 skaters, and they were missing their top gun, Joey Dulce, which definitely showed. UNLV UCCS, definitely a game that we'll take a look at, as well as the other ASU UCS or UCCS game, and then of course the championship. UNLV coming away with a really good result, 28 goals for and 6 goals against in their 4 games as they went 4-0. Just excuse me, a little bit of a recap here as you can see the standings from the event. So we'll go game by game now and take a look at some of the bigger games from the event, and I guess it would probably make sense to start with UNLV and UCCS. Ian, any thoughts on this going into the game? I believe these teams did get to play in Colorado Springs, and UNLV smoked them. 7-1 was the final, and it looked like a little bit more of the same as to what we saw in Colorado, and it looks like we saw kind of the same thing happen in Vegas.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a reoccurring theme with these two teams. They played 3 times in the last 2 years. I mean, the first time was in April at Iceworks during the national championships, and for the most part, that game was a little bit closer. We had Zach Blake having a pretty good game that time, and that game only ended up being 6-3. However, these two more recent games seem to be more indicative of where UNLV is this season. Just it looks like they're dominating the time of possession. It seemed like this last one at the interregional though was a little bit of a penalty-filled affair. It looked like there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 penalties. So that's that's almost the entire period's worth of penalties there. Of course, Atea and Mitchell got into it at the beginning of the first period, and as the game went on, UNLV looked like they imposed a little bit more of their will. Cody Williams putting home a goal, Austin Shannon getting a couple assists, and also a goal himself. And just looking at the statistics as well from that game, it's kind of it's kind of not off-putting, but it's kind of scary how even the scoring is that's coming through this team. So when they're rolling on all cylinders, they're definitely getting going. So that's something to be aware of for all teams that are looking, especially in the WCRHL come regionals.
Yeah, picking up Cody Williams, definitely a big move for UNLV, who in his 5 games this season put up 22 points in his 5 regular season games, and 8 games his 28 points overall. So that's definitely a big pickup for them. And like you said, just scoring overall, definitely spread. They've got a lot of guys that can put the puck in the net. 4 guys with at least 10 goals in WCRHL games alone, and if you look at the overall stats, which counts the interregional games that we just played, couple of guys with 20 goals, three 20-goal scorers, and plenty of guys getting on the board for them. So also definitely worth noting, when they get the goaltending, a scary team to play against. Terry Martin played outstanding this weekend, and it was really a big help to them. Not that they necessarily needed it all the time as they kind of rolled through everybody, but that said, he was there when they needed him to make big saves, and I think that was a big part of momentum swings for them in some of these games, and definitely in the UCCS game. If we take a quick look back at the box score, and I was watching a little bit of this game, UNLV came out and got an early goal in the second, and I think one of the hardest things about playing against a team like UNLV is they know if they can score first or get on the board first and get that momentum, it's extremely hard to get it back from them because they're so physical, and they really just make sure that they outwork their opponents. They get to lose pucks first, they win board battles, and they not only do they play really smart and they take chances when they have them, but they utilize their size and speed, and they know how to kind of get in guys' heads too. So I think that they're definitely a team that's tough to play against, both mentally and physically, and I think that showed this weekend. I guess we can kind of take a look at the ASU UNLV game, and then we'll go back to UCCS ASU. This was the championship game of the event, and UNLV came out real hot. They had a lot of people in the stands. They kind of promoted this game as the big game of the weekend, and right off the bat, they got the scoring going. 28 seconds in, off of a turnover, Axel Anderson put the puck in the net, and right off the next face-off, UNLV with possession, and it was a rush going the other way, and on the ensuing turnover, or the ensuing rush for UNLV, Andrew Tamura found the net off of an Austin Shannon pass. So right there, 2-0, and it was kind of just a similar situation in the second period as after the first period is 2-0, and I would say both teams kind of, UNLV obviously had the momentum going in the second, but ASU is definitely composed. They had a lot of chances there in the first half towards the end, and we're getting opportunities and stuff, and Terry Martin was coming up big with a lot of saves, but right off the bat in the second, UNLV got the scoring going again, and same as the UCCS game, it's just once that lead is built up and they have that momentum and they're rolling, it's really tough to come back against a team that is that fundamentally sound and plays that smart of a game. So that said, any thoughts on your end from that game?
Yeah, I mean, it's really comes down to momentum swings and just being able to ride the waves in when you're high, to continue to put teams away, further and further away. It's not. I mean, it's obviously it's not a perfect formula that you can write out, like, hey, you score in the first 40 seconds of the game, you're guaranteed to put them away, or hey, if you're gonna let up a goal in the last minute of a period, that's gonna dig you in a hole that you can't get out of. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I think that's kind of how it goes in the WCRHL in general. When teams are playing each other, you just have to take a look at it. It's almost like basketball. Like when certain teams go on a run, they go on a run. When ASU comes up against UNLV in this situation, when they put up 2 straight goals, then you're all of a sudden you're chasing the game, and chasing the game for 24 minutes going into the third period. That's going to make it unbearably difficult to get back into the game. And because by that time you're all gassed, and it's hard to get yourself into a position where you can chip away at the lead. When they're controlling the scoreboard, essentially, even if you have tons of time of possession and things like that, sometimes it really comes down to teams that can really ride that momentum and bury shots in quick succession. And if you're shooting at a high shooting percentage, you're going to win the game, and UNLV did that for the most part.
Yeah, they found the net. They played on their opportunities, but definitely important to point out just the momentum swings and making sure that they converted on their chances after a lot of good ASU chances that just were not finding the net. And Terry Martin made big save after big save, and I think that they really rode that momentum as well as having the and stuff. They definitely deserved to win that game, and they came out and played a better game. And props to them for showing up at their own home event and being ready to go. I think that's the kind of team they are, and it was cool to see the support that they had, just in the sense that they really had everybody into the event and into what they were kind of doing and everything. So that was definitely pretty cool to see. On the UCCS ASU front, and we'll get to that in a second. Just gonna pull those game results up, and you can kind of see some of the pictures from the event, the ASU UNLV game. Pretty cool that they went all out and had the starting lineups and everything, and you can see there were definitely some people there ready to watch. Also, Kurt Wyman, former coach, presented with an award, so very cool to see that. And just a good event overall, and a great job by the UNLV guys putting it all together.
UNLV rocking some new unis there too, looking pretty nice.
Yeah, they got the third uniforms going, and that's pretty cool. I know they were excited about that, and they built that up and everything. Kind of segueing to the other big game, I would say. A big game for both ASU and UCCS. UCCS's last chance at playing what I would say is one of the upper echelon teams in another region in ASU, and ASU's really only challenge when it comes to interregional play, as they did handle Colorado State pretty handedly 8-0 earlier in the tournament, but this was a big game for ASU because ASU right now kind of a middle of the pack team in terms of standings and record and such in the WCRHL, but just a big game for them to kind of assert themselves against another high-level team that has had good results this season.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, this is what you wait for, most of the year, right? To finally stop using transitive property and figure out, where do teams match up, where do the regions match up, how well do they do, when they play, when the toughest from one region gets together with another one, and you get to see, you get to see them essentially in a vacuum, which team works out to represent their region well, and I think that this interregional event, especially this game between Arizona State and Colorado Springs, we really got to see where the best of one region kind of stacks up against the upper echelon of another region. Because let's be honest, UNLV, like anywhere you go, UNLV, Michigan State, Lindenwood, Newman are on a cut above the rest. It's hard to even have any region match up with that. But when you start to see the number 2 and 3 from each region start to play each other, you get a better feel of where all these regions are at. And it looks like somebody had a pretty solid game in net from both sides. Is that pronounced Dietrich?
Kyle Dietrich, yeah.
Yeah, Dietrich and Lopez. They both played stellar games, and Tyler Corsel's just been doing what he's been doing for the last 6 years of playing roller hockey for ASU. That's an over exaggeration, but he went out there and he did his job, and it was clearly a good game between the two teams, and once again it also goes to show you, from what I assume, Arizona State had the possession for the majority of the game, but sometimes it doesn't matter when good goaltending stands in the way and kind of shuts things down for a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of look at the results that UCCS had in their home interregional event, beating Cal Poly. They had the rough loss to UNLV, which I would say probably was a combination of just UNLV being a better team and then the matchup. UCCS definitely not that they rely on him, but when Tyler Lopez is on, he is a huge asset to them and definitely keeps them more competitive with these really high-level teams, as you saw in the 5-4 loss to Lindenwood right here. But they handled UCSB. They beat Cal Poly, which is a team that ASU has kind of struggled with for a while the last few years. Historically, it's kind of been a pretty even matchup, but the last couple of years has been definitely all Cal Poly, and then had the 1-goal loss to Lindenwood. So I think going into this event, UCCS was probably the second, I think a lot of people would say the second best team going into this event. And I think ASU with the win, and just kind of like you said, I mean, it was a somewhat dominating performance in terms of opportunities and shots. Not that UCCS wasn't in the game, and they did have a lot of high-quality scoring chances and stuff, but you can see the shot count and everything, and I think that it's definitely shows the potential of a team like ASU, and it's going to be interesting to see how well the West does as we kind of move forward and get ready for nationals and obviously regionals too. But this was, I believe, the last chance that any of the WCRHL teams were going to get to play in an interregional event. So pretty big deal, I would say, for ASU to get that win. And I don't know, any thoughts sort of on the implications of is this game really that big of a deal, or was it just kind of more of a statement game? Do you see it potentially affecting anything in terms of the pools and sort of like you were saying, the whole transitive property thing? I don't know if you have anything to add there.
I think, this win by ASU does, I don't know if it does a lot more for, I think it's kind of hard to kind of summate this quickly, but I think this win for ASU was bigger for the WCRHL than it was for themselves. I mean, you looked at we looked at the interregional that they held in Colorado Springs, correct? And that home event for them that they held out there, and you saw the wins that they had. They had the win against Cal Poly. They had the win against UC Santa Barbara. Although UC Santa Barbara, I think, wasn't fully staffed there. And then they had that close game against Lindenwood, which was a 5-4 loss. That was, if UCCS doesn't go down here and lose the game to ASU and lose the game to UNLV by such a lop-handed score again, I would argue that UCCS would probably be in the top two pools going into nationals, because essentially the WCRHL has always been a highly ranked region, and they took care of business when they played in Colorado Springs. And then also this game against San Jose State. I mean, when you really think about it, UCCS has only lost, they have a above 500 record against the West. So you would see if Colorado State hadn't gone down to this region as well, this interregional in Vegas as well, you'd probably see the Rocky Mountain ranked higher than them. But I think ASU just pretty much did a big favor for all the teams going into nationals, like Cal Poly, who are typically looking to be in the top couple seeds, to keep them there and say that maybe the games that were in Colorado were an aberration, but who knows? We're not the selection committee, but we can only make guesses going forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely a big weekend for the WCRHL in Las Vegas, and a big weekend for really all the teams that played out east, as well as we kind of segue to the other big interregional event, and that was the ECRHA Challenge Cup in Mount Pleasant at Hot Shots. It's been going for, Ian, any idea how long it's been? I mean, you know more about this event than I do, at least historically.
The Hot Shot, I mean, so every year, from every year that I've worked with the ECRHA, and that's like 2006, this event has been held in Hot Shots, and it's always been opened as an interregional, but it was only the last couple, I want to say 3 years, where they started making this an event where there was, awards being handed out and such like that. So there's that essentially. But I mean, now it's become a yearly Winterfest kind of thing. I don't know if you remember, but way back when, there used to be a Winterfest held in Florida for the teams to go into. But now this is kind of the destination spot for big teams, and Lindenwood's gone there in the past, and Michigan State's come, and they came this year, and then also This is pretty much the only chance for teams to get a chance to play Newman, because it's a requirement for all ECRHA teams to play in interregionals if you're in D1. If you're in D1 and you don't play at an interregional, you're not eligible for nationals in the ECRHA, which is a big issue because a team like Temple actually dropped out of this interregional this year, and it's looking like they may not be eligible to go to nationals because they didn't participate.
Are they going to have another opportunity to play in an interregional, or how does that all pan out?
In the end, that comes down to what happens with what Temple does. If they put it together and they decide to travel out or maybe even play a home series against a team close by in the South or close by in the Midwest, play someone like in Ohio, play in Ohio State or something like that. That's a possibility. But they're going to have to go travel because this was the closest that anybody was coming to them. So not sure what the future holds in store for the Temple Owls. But getting back on track, this was a pretty big or not scheduled, but a pretty good playoff here between all of the teams that were in town. You even had some Division II stuff going on between a highly touted East Carolina team who played Stony Brook, who for the most part has been a middle of the pack kind of team this season, but they proved their worth. They were able to, I believe, steal a game from East Carolina this weekend, and then also there was a couple of D3 games I believe that were played as well between Lindenwood, Newman, Michigan State, and Rowan, which were all either national bound teams or alternates last year. But Newman's D3 team has come a long way in that time too, only losing the Lindenwood goal 3-0. And then winning a barn burner against Michigan State 10-9, which was an unbelievable game just to watch tweeted from the Michigan State. I'm trying to think of the Twitter account. That Michigan State team was also able to beat Lindenwood in the Division III format as well. So that's got a lot of stuff looking forward towards nationals and national implications for that as well. But yeah, so to get back into the swing of things, with a lot of people really come and listen to our show for, the Division I was an absolute treat to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely a big deal there, and that's sort of on the D3 front. That sort of rounds out, I think, the top four being LU. Not that we didn't necessarily know it, but kind of reaffirms that I would imagine the top four going into nationals would be LU, Newman, MSU, and ASU in no particular order. But nonetheless, like you said, D1, a lot of action and just a big weekend for both MCRHL teams and the ECRHA teams, as well as Lindenwood representing the Great Plains. But any initial thoughts on the some of the matchups that you see here? Any games that you want to highlight real quick that we can kind of look at before we look at the 2 or 3? Definitely the championship, but anything that sticks out that you want to kind of mention and talk about?
I think the Michigan State game versus Newman was kind of a big deal. I was wondering, how Newman would handle playing a team that was a top echelon team that they didn't necessarily have as much history with. Although Michigan State did knock them out of nationals in Fort Myers a couple of years back when Michigan State had gone all the way to the finals. But there was a couple real close games between them, and then of course the final game that ended up being the championship game was a treat too, with the 8-5 win in favor of Newman.
So yeah, definitely, and also worth noting, the MSU team this year, not really the same MSU team that we've seen in the past in terms of their roster. Big player turnover, and we'll kind of take a quick look at that. But if you just look at the roster or the player stats from last year and compared to this year, top scorers, Zach Rourke, Zach Paul, Ryan Kish, Dylan Kamen, Colin Sear, were kind of their guns last year. And then if you take a look at, of course, also worth noting, guys like Aaron Rivkin, these are guys that aren't there now. Sear is still there, and they have Kamen and Paris Gavin. Tyler Jones has been there for a while, but they picked up Connor Kendrick, who played for Arizona State last year, and then sort of some new faces that have kind of been filling the void that the other guys left. And then great goaltending, Ev Bomarito, with a great performance in especially the first game against Newman, but overall just in the tournament, kept them in games and such, and that was definitely a big one. How about anything that you see from Michigan State? How does this help them kind of reassert themselves where most people, I think, thought they were, but there are obviously some questions because of their roster and such, and the player turnover. Anything that you think from this weekend for MSU in terms of implications moving forward?
Yeah, I think that there's some pretty positive implications that are going forward for Michigan State. I'm waiting for my stat sheet to load here before I can give a little bit more insight. But I think you have a team like Michigan State who every year kind of just goes and just coasts through their NCRHL schedule, and they don't get tested until usually the Palatine event, which is the one where the teams from the Midwest usually come, and they'll get tested again this year. They'll play Lindenwood, they'll play Bethel. But yeah, usually you see them all year. They win games like 14-0 or 15-3 or 5-0, so on and so forth. But they've had a couple close games this year, and that really tests the resolve of a young team that's filled with freshmen and filled with a lot of uncertainty going forward, whether they're going to be a stronger team or not. But a lot of people said who are close to the Michigan State camp that this wasn't going to be a big individual team like it has been in the past with the giant individual scorers making big efforts, but it was going to be more of a team game, and they were going to keep games close, and they were going to try and strike late in games because they had good goaltending and things like that. So, I think what this does for the Michigan State team is they're looking forward into Palatine for January 31st and February 1st is they're thinking to themselves, okay, we hung in there with the team that eventually took down that eventually ended up taking down Lindenwood in their semifinal. They'll think to themselves like, hey, we can do just about anything as long as we play the right kind of team game and we're able to control the puck or we're able to bury our chances. So I think this is a confidence boost for a young team. It's like it's kind of similar to what you see in the NHL now with I'm trying to think of the New York Islanders. It's a young team, and a lot of people didn't know what they're going to see out of them this year, and then all of a sudden they start winning games, and you're like, hey, we believe in ourselves, and we're going to do the right things to get us, close to where we want to be, which is at a national championship.
Yeah, good to see those guys proving a few of the doubters wrong, but overall just keeping their status as one of the elite teams in the league, and some really good guys over at MSU. So it's cool to see another team be competitive with these top echelon teams, especially Newman. And like you said, it'll be interesting to see how they do this coming weekend with games against Bethel and Lindenwood, as well as Grand Valley State. Looking back at the Mount Pleasant event, there was obviously another couple of games worth noting. The Lindenwood Newman games, which we'll touch on in a second, but just wanted to kind of quickly look at the other kind of regional implications with the MCRHL and ECRHA matchups. If there are any game results that kind of stuck out to you that maybe kind of told us more about some of these teams and sort of where everyone stacks up.
The overtime win of Grand Valley State over Rhode Island was a big one. Rhode Island, what are they sitting at right now in the East? I mean, they've been kind of a rebuilding team for the last however many years now, and they're kind of sitting, at 3-5, second from the bottom, right above Hofstra, who, this season, and they were able to take Grand Valley State to a real tough game. Grand Valley State is actually technically on top of the Midwest region right now, with 12 wins and 4 losses. That's only 16 games played. Michigan State's played 4 less games than them, which is why they sit 2 points behind them in the standings. But yeah, that's got to mean something right there. That a team out of the bottom place, or one of the bottom place, the cellar of the ECRHA, is able to keep a game so close against the top echelon of the MCRHL. And then obviously when they ran into Michigan State, it was a whole different scenario. They ended up losing 16-1. So I think what that means is, aside from the top 4 or 5 teams in the regions, or excuse me, not in the regions, in the nation, which is your Lindenwood, your Michigan State, your UNLV, and your Newmans, the rest of the field, it has a lot of parity, and that's essentially what the NCRHA has been missing for the last however many years. It's just there hasn't been really any parity. It's like the top 4 teams, like that was the ongoing joke that was like, the national champion was whoever lost to Lindenwood in the final. But like now you start to see the parity. The cream is starting to rise to the top, and teams are starting to get closer and stuff like that here. And then you also see Pittsburgh beating Eastern Michigan, and then what else here? Rhode Island beating Ohio State, Slippery Rock hanging in there with Eastern Michigan as well. So you just have to think there's, that's a positive that there's so much parity in the league right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also worth noting was Rutgers, and we haven't given them as much attention as they might deserve. They've kind of had they've had an interesting season for sure in their results, and sort of they've just been a little bit all over the place with the jump to D1, and I know they were not super excited about that, as a lot of teams weren't, but lo and behold, they have been competitive, especially when they went on that run after our last rankings, which were November 21st, and we haven't done a ranking since then. They won 6 in a row, including a win over Northeastern. They beat Temple, they beat Westchester, they beat Rowan, sort of asserting themselves as like the top, if you will, maybe tier 2 team in the ECRHA. I think Newman and Pitt are kind of the tier 1 teams, if you will, and Northeastern, depending on their lineup and who shows up, they can definitely beat those teams, but then they're sort of the rest of the pack, and they had kind of proven themselves, and then having some really good games, the 1-goal loss against Grand Valley State, and then the 1-goal loss against Michigan State. That's a big game too, because we saw how good Michigan State was against teams like Newman and obviously smoking Rhode Island. So maybe Rutgers is a team to kind of keep an eye on as we get ready to go into regionals.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, they had a lead going into the third, and then they gave up 2 straight goals, one at the very beginning of the period, and then one, midway through at 8 minutes, with 4 minutes left to go in the game. So you just got to think that Rutgers is maybe onto something, and that's like maybe the whole thing that you have to think about when it comes to, moving teams up in the NCRHA. Like, even though teams are real hesitant, they always want to, kind of get a little upset about initially moving up. And like, yeah, you're going to struggle. That game against Newman was pretty tough for them at the beginning of the season, losing by 13. Game against Pittsburgh where they lost by 10. So on and so forth. You look through the lineup. What's the next game against Newman? Lose by 6. But then when you start playing against teams that you're supposed to be close with, that are those tier 2 teams, they go in there and they battle hard, and things tend to be a little bit more bright for teams who are moving up into the league.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll have some more research as we really try to ramp stuff up going into nationals and have more input. But I think it's worth noting, we're going to try to do some research and figure out how teams are playing and who's kind of matching up against what, because obviously I don't know because I wasn't there, but if a team like Rutgers is boxing up and is able to keep a game close against Michigan State, that doesn't necessarily mean they would be able to do it against, for example, UNLV or whoever, just because the way teams play, and some teams just don't know how to beat certain systems, and that's a huge part of it. And so that's what's tough when there isn't a lot of interregional play is you can see a close score, and I'm not indicating that these scores were that situation. Just in general, I mean, it's cool that Rutgers was able to adjust and they took a 4-goal loss and played the same team and made it only a 1-goal loss. That's a big difference. And good to see teams be able to adjust like that, similar to what UNLV did to get their win over Lindenwood in Colorado Springs after getting smoked in their first game, able to make adjustments and pull out the W. But some teams are just going to be able to match up better with others, and so when there isn't a whole lot of interregional play, that's, I think, a big part of it. If a team matches up well with another team and gets the win or gets a certain result, we don't want to put too much of an emphasis on that and say that this team is now better or worse than, say, every other team in another region. But with a lot of gameplay between the NCRHL and the ECRHA at Winter Cup, kind of like you were saying, Ian, it's definitely easier to see sort of where some of those teams fall and belong. Lastly, on that note, I guess we've got to talk about the big matchups that everyone were waiting for, and that would, of course, be the Newman-Lindenwood games. We had one on Saturday, and then we, of course, had one on Sunday, and that was the semifinal before the championship games that we just talked about. Any input there? Of course, Lindenwood winning the first one 3-2, and then Newman able to defeat Lindenwood in the semis the next morning by the same score, 3-2, to advance to the final where they took out MSU. Thoughts on this matchup and sort of the rivalry that's heating up between these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually having this conversation earlier in the week. Like, is this a rivalry that we're starting to see? The team that, teams that see each other so infrequently, can they really build up an animosity towards one another to the point where it gets to the point where it's a full blown rivalry between teams? And I think at this point you got to say, yeah, it's gotten to that level. I mean, this season head to head is 1-1, even though Lindenwood leads the all-time series 4-1. But there's all these games are so close, and the thing that's outstanding about these games are, you look over the last 4 games between these two, it's been 1-goal games. It's a 3-2 win in Mount Pleasant last year for Lindenwood. In Aston, it was a 2-1 win in the national championship. Mount Pleasant earlier that week on Saturday, 3-2 Lindenwood, and then the scores reversed for the last game, where Newman wins 3-2. These aren't high-scoring games. These are games where you have two teams with really good systems just trying to grind it out the whole way. I mean, we don't know how accurate the shots on goal is, but 18-19 is not a typical shots on goal that you see for a high stakes roller hockey game. These teams are really smart. They take they pick and choose their chances. They capitalize when they need to, and it brings out the best in college roller hockey when these two teams meet each other, I think. And I think it brings out the best in each of their players, because I think there's a serious hatred of losing here. Maybe not a hatred of the other team, but there's definitely a hatred of losing. And it's also really kind of funny to see out in the Twitterverse just who is rooting for who, because I think that there's this general disdain by the general population for both teams, which is kind of funny, because I think it's kind of they hate us because they ain't us kind of thing, you know what I mean? But I think it's wonderful to see a team like Newman, who's been historically a powerhouse in D2, move up to D1 in just a few short years, have NCRHA Pro guys battling, a team that's always been comprised of NCRHA Pro guys, and Lindenwood University, and then being able to come out on top, it's something that I'm looking forward to see happen more often down the road.
Well, that's the name of the game, right? Is these opportunities, and at the high level, whether it's the platinum level at NCRHA or the NCRHA Pro level, or IIHF or FIRS or whatever, and obviously the higher levels or the higher stakes matchups in the NCRHA, whoever converts on the other team's mistakes best is going to win the game. And it's not just playing your game or whatever. It's basically who's going to make mistakes. Whichever team makes the least amount of mistakes generally is going to win the game. That could be anything from puck possession to bad turnovers, penalties, whatever, depending on the team that's playing in the style. But obviously possession's super important, and you could tell just based on shots, as well as the people that we've talked to that were they're watching this game, these two games, how important these teams take their possessions, how patient they are with the puck, and just the decision making that they make, because they know when they do make a mistake, the other team is going to capitalize. And so it's a combination of making sure you don't make a lot of mistakes and then capitalizing when your opponent does. And I mean, that's hockey in general, but it's so much more amplified, I guess you could say, when you're playing another team that is at this caliber, and when you get two teams that match up like this, it really is just making sure that you minimize your mistakes, and when the opponent does make a mistake, you have to capitalize on your opportunity. And you see it night in and night out in other sport, obviously in leagues like the NHL, and not to make an NHL comparison or anything like that, but it's when you get these high level teams with a lot of skill that are close with each other. That's what happens, and that's, I think, sort of indicated in the results as well.
Yeah, there was while I was looking through the timeline and everything like that. I mean, there was some missed chances too. I mean, that's another big thing, is like, how big are the opportunities that you miss going to come back and bite you in the butt? Because Lindenwood apparently had a bevy of chances where they were just missing the net. And, they would have had a pair earlier in the game that they ended up losing if they were just able to keep their shots onto the net and everything like that. But it's not like it's not like these teams were going out there and just haphazardly saying, like, hey, we're just gonna throw all our artillery at you, and then you're gonna throw it all at us, and we're gonna weather the punches, and whoever comes out is gonna make it out on top. I think they both had a game plan going into the game, and coaches Billenstein and Strophe had set ideas about what they wanted to do and execute. And they were both able to execute it well enough one game that they both came away with the win. But for Newman, theirs came away. That win came away in the bracket play as opposed to the pool play, which is, in the end, that's the most important thing. It's not how many games you win; it's when you win them.
Yeah, definitely the truth, and we've seen that over the years with a lot of teams in this league winning timely games and maybe not being as competitive in the regular season, but being able to win the big games. And that's sort of a good segue to sort of a little bit of a wrap up. On that same note, we saw a tweet. Of course, I'm going to mention it because I saw it, and I didn't see Alex Dote send it out, but when I saw it instantly, it kind of hit that note. And that was this right here, as you can see it on the screen. The D1 team since 2009 is 28-5 against non-WCRHL teams, and all 5 of those losses were against Lindenwood. And so, ASU, not necessarily a team that is always having super strong regular seasons. Of course, some of that is because of a roster with ice hockey guys. Not really the case this year. They have their full squad. They picked up Nick Spinasana for second semester that has played with them in the past, but being able to bring this squad kind of to the top of their game, the top level that they can play at by nationals, is something they've always been able to do. And so, kind of like you said, there are other teams that are in that boat. Any other teams that you think maybe we haven't seen their best game yet, or teams that we know are going to be able to turn it on? Maybe like an LA Kings, where you're not really that good in the regular season, but they're going to make a run for it once we get to nationals.
I would think Pittsburgh would be one. UMSL, which is a team we haven't really talked about a lot, it could be another. Those two teams seem like they're teams that can just hang out, and then maybe they get a good seeding, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're just out and out the door, and they're probably giving teams some real grief going into the round robin play, or excuse me, into the bracket play come nationals or come down the stretch. I think another one that you got to be a little bit scared of that nobody is talking about, and when I say nobody's talking about, I mean nobody's talking about, which is UCF. I mean UCF's won all but one game this year, and they absolutely beat up on a Northeastern team this year 8-1. Win a game that had some absurd amount of shots, like a combined 90 shots per team, or 90. Yeah, it was like 50-40. It was something absurd like that, which is just. Yeah, that's. I can't even believe that many shots could be thrown on net. They must have just been taking half-court ones or something. But but yeah, that's another team that it has a pedigree. I mean, I can't remember the last time UCF hasn't gone to nationals. They've just been around for. I mean, last year I don't believe they went. But I think before that you have to look at how strong of a team. Did they go to nationals? Yeah, they were at nationals last year. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that team's been around forever, and they're well organized and they're well put together. And you got to think that maybe that's a team that maybe just puts on a miracle run all of a sudden and upsets a team out of the Midwest or upsets a team out of the East, and all of a sudden they're in the Final Four. I mean, that happened a couple of years ago with Long Beach. Happened a couple of years ago before that with a team more than a couple of years ago. It happened a little while back, maybe in San Jose with a team like UNT. It's just there's always a possibility for teams like this to come out and surprise somebody. So that's why I love interregional play. We get a better look and better idea of how things are going to work out going forward. And it's just, right now we just get to debate and think about where are we going next with the next events coming up.
Yeah, definitely some stuff that stands out to me. Of course, just looking through standings and such, these are the overall standings, counting these interregional games, and there might be a couple preseason games for a few of these teams thrown in. For the most part, regular season plus interregional. MSU 18-3, Lindenwood 13-2-1. Of course, the overtime loss to UNLV, and then the two losses, one to UMSL, or I'm sorry, one to Bethel and one to Newman. But these teams, a team like Newman 17-1, 27 goals against in 18 games, Lindenwood 35 goals against in 16 games, MSU 18-3. They've given up some more than those teams, but kind of the NCRHA a little bit more of a high-scoring league, I think you could argue, than some of the other ones. We sort of saw UCCS, and I wouldn't say that means that they're a bad team based on their play this past weekend, but I think kind of just shows down from top to bottom how good the WCRHL is. And I mean, I've said it, and of course people out west will always advocate. People are always going to advocate for where they're from and the teams that play in their league, but for a team like San Jose State to give a one-goal game to UCCS, that definitely says a lot about the West. And a team like UC Santa Barbara with a guy like Kyle Mooney to only be 4-10-2 in their 16 games overall, and that is counting their Colorado Springs performance. But also Arkansas in D2. I would say North Texas in D1, but I know Arkansas and North Texas both kind of the teams to watch in the SCHL. But Arkansas has definitely been the better team of the two with those two wins against UNT last weekend. But overall teams that I'm kind of keeping an eye out that you didn't mention, I know you did mention UCF and UMSL. I'm going to stick to those two regions and say Kennesaw, who went 2-2 with skaters and net this past weekend. I know, obviously, we're not going to factor that kind of stuff into the rankings, as you got to show up and play and see how you do. But overall, just to kind of a testament to their season, they had that one loss early to UCF, but besides those two losses here this past weekend, which obviously it hurts to not be able to have your goalie in net. They did have a pretty good weekend. Besides that, beating Florida Gulf Coast and VT. So Kennesaw, I think, is a team that could maybe do well in like a Pool D or a Pool E, and come out of there and maybe upset somebody in the bracket play. Also, Missouri State. I know they haven't had as tough of a challenge as some of these other Great Plains teams, but they did have the 1-goal loss against Bethel, and they also have had some good games against some of the other Lindenwood D3 teams, etc. So I don't know if Missouri State is really up there with some of these other teams, but interesting to see how they do the rest of the way. Another D2 team that made the jump up or back up to D1. What else? Anything else to wrap up? We got some more stuff coming up this weekend. We've got a big NCRHL interregional. We've got the rankings coming out, so keep an eye out for those.
D2, don't think we've forgotten about you. We're gonna have a show just about you guys real soon, and we're gonna come out with your rankings and everything like that. The RPI rankings have been out for a little while for the D1 team, so you get an idea of where the analytics is placing teams just based on sole statistics and win-loss percentages and things like that. But yeah, D2, D3, don't worry about you guys. You'll definitely get a shout out very soon. I know that guys like Bill Bork and the rest of the University of Delaware squad are real excited to hear about where they might be placing with the University of Massachusetts. Guys,
Boston, I know Boston tweeted us.
Yeah, they're all really looking into how those things might be going coming up the last couple of weeks, because there hasn't been an update in that in too long. But things are real crazy in D2. Western Michigan's up on top of the Midwest. Who saw that coming? Georgia College up on top of the Southeast. I didn't see that one coming either. Tennessee's doing really well this year. There's all over the place. You got teams just absolutely looking great going forward. UC San Diego, even though they're playing with five guys a games, they're really doing well. Farmingdale still, I think, the only undefeated team. No, Arkansas and Farmingdale are the two only undefeated teams in the nation right now. So that's cool stuff to see as well.
Yeah, and UCSD as well at 10-0, but all just unbelievable to see the parity that's
lost this weekend, actually.
Oh, really? Are those scores just not in there then, I'm guessing?
I guess that score, no, it should be in there, unless it just hasn't. For some reason, it hasn't uploaded for one way or another. I believe they lost to Irvine this weekend. Yeah, they lost 4-5 to Irvine in their first game.
So they lost to take it.
They lost their first game this weekend to an Irvine team that didn't have Scott Rotman at that.
Interesting. So we'll have to take a look at those results and make sure those get factored in when we do our rankings. And then, of course, we're gonna start putting some more stuff out there about in terms of help that we could use. We're definitely looking for guys that want to contribute, whether it's blogs. We need some guys doing camera stuff, photo, video. Anyone that needs any type of experience or could benefit from experience in this kind of in this game of social media and covering this league, we would love to have you on, and we are looking for the help. And there are going to be some internship opportunities in the near future for guys to be able to help and come contribute through the NCRHA. So we're working on that and getting that going. But in terms of getting firsthand experience, doing something like this, I don't think you're going to get the hands-on experience that you would get from this with another a bigger media news outlet, maybe you blog for SB Nation or something like that, and that's obviously pretty cool, and that's going to look good on a resume. But in terms of getting the hands-on experience and getting to be involved in the process and stuff, I don't think you're going to get any closer to the big picture type stuff as you will here. So we'd love to have you on, and we'll be looking for guys that are interested in helping us out and making sure we're ready to go as we get ready for regionals, and then of course the national championships in Independence, Missouri later this year. So that said, we're out of here for the night. We'll be back hopefully by Wednesday. Definitely pretty soon we'll be back, and we'll get another show going. We'll have some more D2 stuff, some cool interviews coming up later this week, and then also be able to look forward to a ton of games this coming weekend. As you guys can see, there's Super Bowl weekend. At least there's 4 different events: Colorado, Northern California, Illinois, the big interregional, and then another event in New Jersey at ISCA. So, Ian, any last words, real quick?
Yeah, no, just keep tweeting us and keep using that NCRHA action hashtag. Makes things a lot easier for everybody to keep on the flow of how things are going. Big shout out to all the teams that are. Actually, big shout out to Abilene Christian. We just heard today that they're going to do the first international exhibition ever. So
yeah, very cool. There, and it is against another college. It's not just them playing some team from Canada or whatever. That's very cool that they're doing that.
And it's super cool. So I'm just gonna, for anybody that, I doubt that this actually happens out there, but for any teams outside of the United States, if you want to come into Tucson and play our squad, we'll do that too. But I know that there's some squads over in Great Britain and things like that. But yeah, I think that's the coolest thing that I've heard out of a team, ever. That's so awesome that they're doing that. And ACU's real big on doing food drives and things like that. So that's just awesome philanthropy on their side and things like that. So yeah, as you can see, February 8th. If you live near Houston, please go see it. And then also anybody listening to this. If you're in that area, film it for us so we can put them out on blast. And we hope that ACU does a great job representing the U.S. While playing our neighbors to the south.
Yeah, it's just a cool thing. These guys are always going over, above and beyond, over the top to make sure that they're doing things to represent the league and stuff, and trying to make a name for themselves. Not obviously a top echelon team, but they're a brand new program, and the dedication that these guys have to growing this club at their school and just growing the game in West Texas, it's really, really cool to see. So shout out to Johnny Spencer and Elijah and the rest of the guys, Ryan at ACU, for doing what they do. Really cool to see these guys doing just some extraordinary things that a lot of other teams could probably benefit from as well, especially like you mentioned, the philanthropy and the fundraisers and stuff. As teams are always trying to figure out how to keep costs down and give back and stuff. So these guys are a prime example of doing things the right way. That's all we've got. We will be back later this week. Keep an eye out for rankings. Get us on Twitter or Facebook if you have anything you want to add. And on top of the rankings, we'll be just doing some other cool stuff, talking about some of the high-end teams, maybe what to expect, a little bit of preview stuff. But get at us, especially if you're interested in helping out, because we could use it. Hope to see you guys soon, and hope to hear from you soon. We'll be back later this week. Take care. Ian?
Yeah,
see you soon,
take
man.
care, everybody.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.